Welcome to the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel, powered by InsideTexas.com. This is IT Live, presented by our friends at Academy Sports and Outdoors. Thank you for joining this morning. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. It may be the month of May. The pads may be put up for a little while, but we still have a ton of stuff to talk about here on Inside Texas. We've kind of gone through the draft storylines, hit all that. But it's now time to look at what could be for a few different positions on the 40 acres this fall, and also what could be for Steve Sarkisian as he reaches a milestone, guys, that we haven't seen in over 2 decades. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're really excited to get going. And Justin, I haven't seen it's the first of the month tweet yet. You got to get that up before too long, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I missed that one this morning. I was so prepared last night. I knew it was coming. Last of April day, April vibes. And I thought, all right, first of the month. And I missed it this morning. I missed it. It's got to be the first tweet of the month. It can't just be a May 1st or a June 1st or July 1st tweet. It has to be the very first tweet of that month.
Should be.
I think I forgot about it when I found the Trevor Gooseby video clip. I don't know if you've seen that on my Twitter timeline just yet, but oh my God, that's what a lottery pick looks like in the NFL draft.
I saw you put 360 on there, and it took me a second before I watched it. I'm like, wait, Trevor Gooseby weighs that much? And then I'm like, no, he's just doing the dunk.
He's doing a 360 dunk.
Should be a lot of yeah. That guy's an athlete, and he reminds a little bit of what the old Groem tackles looked like. And, man, he's going to make the most of a career probably at left tackle here for the Longhorns. But we're not talking about big boys, at least not here to start. We're talking a little bit about wide receivers. And Ian, you wrote something over on Inside Texas. How will Steve Sarkisian use his wide receivers in 2025? Before we start getting into the players, let's kind of go back to maybe not the glossary, but let's go to the chalkboard real quick and just explain what the various roles at wide receiver in this offense are before we start to get to the guys who may fill those roles wearing burnt orange.
Yeah. So you have your Z, your Y, your R, your H, and your X are your 5 skill positions. The R is a running back. Really simple. Don't worry about that. The Y is a tight end for Texas. In Texas, I don't know if I've seen Sark play without a tight end more than like 10, 20 snaps in 4 years or something. There's basically always a tight end. So Y, tight end, don't worry about that. The H is your slot. And for Texas, sometimes it's a literal slot receiver. Or if they play with 2 tight ends, that slot is the guy he's moving into another position or he's hitting the bench, and the H becomes your second smaller tight end. So they'll play it like Juan Davis played the H. Jatavian Sanders would be the Y if they had a slot on the field, and if they brought in another tight end, Jatavian Sanders would move to the H, and the Y would be Gunnar Helm or an extra offensive lineman or whatever. The X and the Z, this is the thing that's really complicated because they mean different things in different offenses. So for like Texas, for a long time, we all got used to the idea that your X is your big boundary receiver and your Z was your wide field receiver. So the ball usually is snapped from one of these 2 hash marks, the dotted white lines across the field. And the X, there's always a shorter, when you're on the hash, there's always a shorter side of the field and a wider side of the field. And so Texas would have the bigger guy in the shorter side of the field because he had to play in condensed space. And then they put like a fast guy out wide. Texas still does that, but the labels are switched.
Right. And I think to further that point on the splits, I know you have to do it for the graphic, but this kind of looks like pro splits or pro hashes. They're a lot wider. The H, sometimes you'll see that H even go further outside the hashes, correct?
In another offense, but Sark tends to bring him in tighter. So he's kind of
a bunch.
Sometimes that H is like right there with the X and the Y and all that. But yeah, in a normal spread offense, the H is like he's out to the hash marks. He's hunting a little more space to work in. The actual rule is that the X relates to the H and the Z relates to the Y. So the next outside guy from the H is generally the X, and the next outside guy from the Y is generally the Z. If the Y were to move over to the other side of the field, the Z would still stay as the outside guy to him, and he'd still stay in the short side. But the way it usually plays out is boundary Z, field X. And then on top of that, of course, Sark is not static, and he moves guys around, and he cross-trains guys at different positions. So it's not quite like with Tom Herman, where it was Colin Johnson is always on the short side. Devin Duvernay is always to the wide side. Lil Jordan Humphrey is moving in between. It's not like that.
And this also isn't static as well. You can have the Y on the line of scrimmage. You can have him. You can have the Z in motion down here. You can have the Y still on the line of scrimmage, but in that same spot with the Z. So these guys are able to move around. One of the things that you talked about and that we've seen play out over the course of Sarkisian's tenure is he basically needs to have 3 wide receivers. We talked a lot last year about how big can this rotation get? It still didn't get that big. It was still 3 guys for the most part. Sometimes he would add in a little bit of Silas Bolden as a change up, but for the most part, he likes to stick with 3. And if he doesn't have 3 that he likes, he'll just go with 2. We saw that with how they use tight ends in the in his second and third season, like you mentioned, the Big 12 package with an offensive lineman playing tight end. If he doesn't think he has 3 that'll work, he's not going to put 3 out there as the predominant, I guess to say, personnel package. But what you're writing today, and time to go back up, is he probably does have 3. May not have more, probably doesn't have less, but he has 3 guys, and yet there's still some figuring out to do when it comes to specific roles because of who they added.
Yeah, all y'all appreciate these yards per target numbers because you don't want to know what I had to do to get those.
You had to go to probably every single box score, right?
There's one particular media company that puts targets in their box scores, but that particular media company does not have easily navigated website pages. So I had to individually look up all their box scores for every Stanford game and every Texas game, and then jot down how many targets each receiver had in those games, and then add it up and divide it from the. So everybody appreciate the work.
Yeah, that's some effort right there, fellas.
It's not pleasant, but beyond the yard per target numbers, which are pretty mediocre, but not unusual for second, third, fourth, fifth option kind of guys. Emmett Mosley and DeAndre Moore both played in the slot last year. So if you're going to play these 3 guys, your main guys, somebody has to move outside.
Justin, when you look at how they attack the transfer portal, at least when it comes to wide receiver, they were looking for, a variety of different guys. And I think maybe when we saw Mosley, you see 6'2", you see the different physical aspects that he has. Even Steve Sarkisian talked about how he recovered well from a knee injury that may have taken him off the original recruiting board in high school. But when you looked at Mosley, did you see slot right away after a few different looks at his film? Or did you maybe think that of the options they had, he could be someone that fit outside maybe a little bit better than DeAndre Moore?
Well, seeing him in person, I thought he was an outside guy because he's not a small guy. And the Longhorns don't have a ton of size at receiver anyway. At least they haven't the last few years. It's getting a little bit bigger in that room. I thought he was an outside guy. Then, of course, you watch the tape and you can see that, and when you talk to a couple sources within the program, and they see him as a slot. They see him as an inside guy, and they actually see him as both. They can do both because they love what Parker Livingstone is doing, but they want to also continue to develop him. Aaron Butler, same way. But Emmett's size, you kind of think, hey, this could be one of those outside possession type guys. What's different about Mosley than all the other ones they bring in is the speed factor. Like that seems to be the biggest recipe in the last couple of years, is they're bringing in guys with just God-given speed. Mosley's not that. So that it's a little, you have to kind of temper your expectations there a little bit. There's plenty of speed in that room, but it's a little slower than the last 2 years. When you're sending the fastest guy to the combine back-to-back years, that can be hard to replace and also hard to replicate. But seeing Mosley at first, you think he's an outside guy. And if you talk to sources, they see him as both outside and inside, as a third down guy, a chain mover, a possession type guy, and also a guy that can help the younger guys kind of get developed a little bit quicker, maybe give Livingstone an extra year to get right, maybe give one of those true freshmen, the three amigos, one of those guys a year to develop a little bit more. Mosley, to me, and you're going to get a couple more years out of him. And so I think that's also a big factor too. There's a lot of turnover there in that room, and I think they're trying to find a little bit more consistency year to year, not just one and done type guys.
So, Ian, I do have a question. I'm doing a quick stats look up on Stanford, and Mosley was obviously in the slot. They also had an NFL wide receiver in Alec Aomanor. And just I'm trying to figure out, why was Mosley in the slot? Because they wanted to get him the ball easier, because they had Aomanor? Like, how did that – and what you've seen – was it personnel or skill set that may have dictated Mosley go to the slot for Stanford?
Well, he's really good over the middle. In all of his highlights, he's working over the middle, moving the chains. So there's that. I think Stanford is also a little more pro style, like Texas. So like an air raid team, they put a little bitty Mighty Might in the slot, get him out in as much space as they can, and let him go left, right, crossers and screens and stuff in space for days. When Sark goes from 2 tight ends to 1 tight end, he still expects the H to mix it up a little bit. Like, he loved having Jordan Whittington and being able to bring him in and block people and bully people. And I think he wants that. I think one of the main reasons Moore was in the slot last year is because he was one of the more physical dudes they had. And Mosley moving inside to block on perimeter screens, to block on runs. I think they see that as a big plus. And so I think Stanford is similar. So it's just sort of a different paradigm for how you use a slot receiver that Sark and Stanford have, and that a lot of the pros are developing as well.
So the main question you get to in the article, Ryan Wingo, we can talk about his fit at Z in a second, but he's got his role. So now the question becomes, who do you move outside? Do you move Moore outside? Do you move Mosley outside? And we can look at that in a second, but first, got to talk about our sponsor, and that is via our friends at Academy. It is Air Jordan. Academy Sports and Outdoors is your new home for Jordan. Gear up today and take flight on the court, off the court, and above the court. Unleash your greatness with head-to-toe Jordan gear for the entire family. Available in-store and at academy.com. There are elevated styles and shoes for everyone. Unstoppable value every single day. And plus, Academy offers easy ways to shop and save time, like free 1-hour in-store curbside pickup on academy.com orders, or you can choose same-day delivery powered by DoorDash. You can order it by 4 and get it by 8. So check out Academy's full Jordan selection at Academy Sports and Outdoors or academy.com.
Or academy.com.
Exactly. So getting to, the main question of the article, and I think somebody kind of asked here's a good way to maybe parlay into it. And sorry to block Ian, but David Swarbrick asked earlier last year, Golden could have been wide receiver 1 because of his level of play, especially in the red zone. But it seemed like Sark wanted Bond to be wide receiver 1 until later. Why the lateness? Bond was good until he was hurt. Things kind of petered out after that. But Bond, I feel like, brought – and wide receiver 1 I think is a little bit different than these positions.
Yeah.
Although you do like your guy at Z in Sark's offense. But I think a lot of it started with the ankle injury, and then it just went downhill from there. And then Golden just started playing really well in those new responsibilities, with Wingo having to do a little bit more. Like, Golden deserves a lot of credit, but I think injuries and the way things went downhill for Bond from that injury, frustration, whatever, that kind of led to the switch. But Ian, the main question of the article: which of Moore and Mosley ends up being the H? And which direction do you end up going here?
Yeah, shout out Freeman Swarbrick, by the way. I think it'll be Mosley in the slot. I think he's kind of a Jordan Whittington facsimile. Can be physical, can catch balls over the middle. I think Moore will go outside to X and be kind of your Xavier Worthy, Matthew Golden guy, who's out in space running verticals, comebacks, and things like that. And then Wingo will be the Z. He'll get a lot of targets. He'll get moved around some. He'll get one-on-one matchups in the boundary. And that's the way they'll do it. Bond, part of the reason Bond got a lot of targets, partly because he was the Z. So he was like the one-on-one guy a lot of times, and he wasn't as far out as Golden was. Part of it was that it was so easy to move Bond around and just throw him the ball laterally and let him just go because he's so fast. If you're gonna make a particular guy in that receiving core the main weapon in your perimeter screen game and your little designer quick game, it was going to be Bond until he fell apart with the ankle injury. And then Golden was like kind of more of like a skilled actual receiver. And Texas was a little hit or miss in maximizing that. And also when Quinn was like the most beat up with the oblique was around when Bond was injured. So if your like best guy is out, this is occurring to me right now. If your best guy is further removed and it's a longer throw and your quarterback's not feeling that good and he's maybe not getting quite as much torque trying to push the ball down the field, that's going to impact how well you utilize him. So that should answer, I think, most of Freeman Swarbrick's various questions.
Justin, so if we're going to go ahead and, for the purposes of this, pencil Mosley in at that H receiver, what allows DeAndre Moore to be a successful guy maybe at that X position that he would be playing if Mosley bumps him outside?
It's his versatility. That's what was so good about him in high school, was that he was a very precise route runner and he always had really good hands, and he was just there wasn't a lot of weakness to his game. He's not the tallest guy or the fastest guy, but he got open and he caught everything and he was tough. And talking about Jordan Whittington earlier, he was willing to block. Him and Ryan Wingo were probably, and Matthew Golden for that credit, were really good blockers. That was one reason Bond couldn't get on the field so much in the second half of the season. He wasn't a willing blocker like some of these other guys. And so Moore can do inside and out. I think they envisioned both those guys playing some inside, playing some H, and growing Livingstone on the outside and some of those, X guys. But it's DeAndre's, it's his versatility. He's got an all-around game. He's not going to dominate you with speed. He's not going to be, the biggest guy, but the guy's not going to miss. And he's going to run the best routes. He's going to know where he's going to find a soft spot in the zone. He's going to be a wonderful target for Arch Manning. And if you remember the very first clips of Arch on campus at Texas, he was there for 2 or 3 days. He was in the bubble throwing deep balls and throwing, timing routes to one guy. It was DeAndre Moore. And so Moore also has, he has a personality that just there's something about him. He is so good for the locker room, and so I think he can play both. I think he's going to play both. I have no doubt in that. I wouldn't mind if Mosley played some outside and allowed DeAndre inside to possibly get a mismatch on the on their nickel or their third corner. But right now, DeAndre's just versatile. He can, and that's what this wide receiver room needs. They don't need anything rigid. These guys have got to be. You're going to have to move these guys in and out because I don't think I don't think they know exactly what that rotation is going to look like yet.
One of the things I'm trying to check real quick on the side screen is what it looked like maybe at Alabama, and the problem is that those Alabama. I mean, the only Texas wide receiver room that's anything close to like the level of play, I'm not saying like profiles and types, was the A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Whittington room. Because when you're looking at Judy, Smith, Waddle, Ruggs, like that's just a level above.
That's getting richer.
The only reason they didn't play for the national title is because they got outscored by LSU. But then if you go ahead and look at 2020, that was the year Jalen Waddle got his ankle messed up, right?
Yeah.
But that was going to be the year where you probably had Devonta Smith at Z, Jalen Waddle at slot, and then Mechie kind of stepped in at slot, but then they also just ran a lot of 2 tight end sets, right?
Yeah, and Mechie was also played outside quite a bit.
He played outside when Ruggs would play inside, right?
Ruggs wasn't on that team.
Okay, I thought Ruggs was there.
So they had that was a year where they had Forrestall and your old guy Major Tennyson was there playing a little bit, but
that was a big tight end.
Yeah, exactly. But and Billingsley was there. But it's just
Billingsley.
It's just there to show they move these guys around a good amount. So it's kind of like, yeah, they're going to be doing a lot of different things, but I guess the question that we're trying to present is, what are they going to do more? What are they going to do more often? A good question that Chris Bennett brings up and something to play. Where does Jack Indries fit into this? How does he change? I mean, you're going to have a tight end on the field like we talked about, but how does he change, or does he change anything about how these wide receivers are used?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he's very similar to Jatavian Sanders and Gunnar Helm. Probably as a blocker, more similar to Sanders, and as a receiver, an athlete, more similar to Helm. So kind of the worst of both worlds, I guess, but still a very good player because those guys were awesome. Actually on the website, somebody mentioned they could play Mosley as the Z, move Wingo all the way out to X, and keep Moore as the slot. That actually kind of makes sense to me too. I think it'll be more what I presented, but that'll be something to watch. Is if they think Mosley is really good at getting open against man coverage outside, then that'd probably be the way you would do it. Is you'd play him in that.
Wasn't that what Wingo was doing last year though, for the most part, until like when he stepped in for Bond?
Z. He was primarily the Z. Wingo was. I think so.
Okay. I think so one thing that you may not have mentioned is who could join them. And, we talked about how there's 3 that we know of right now that Texas feels pretty good about. But Justin, if you had to pick to add one, let's say all you had to do is add one more receiver from the guys Texas currently has on campus, who do you think has a good chance to make their way into this rotation? And then what role might you see him in?
It's Parker Livingstone, and he'll be the X. That's something they've been working on all spring. I think that's a given. He had a really good spring. It wasn't just flashes. Like, he was consistently beating a pretty good secondary day after day. But it's not just going to be Livingstone. It's going to be, I think, of the 3 amigos, those freshmen, I think Dalen McCutcheon is the one that we need to talk about, because he's kind of like Moore. He can play that X, but he can also play the H. He can play some inside slot. That's where he I think start at actually, but he's versatile enough to also do some outside stuff. It's funny because that's an analog right there, Moore and McCutcheon. There's a lot of similarities in their game, but I'd say Parker Livingstone, he's earned at this point in the locker room, he's earned the right. He's earned the respect of the team. He's earned Sark and Coach Jackson's respect. And that was the biggest thing. Now all you have to see is translate in a game. He's done every level at every step. He's gone along. Now he's got to do it to translate in the game. I think that's the one that they really want to see kind of pop up. But Dalen McCutcheon, I'm telling you, remember that name, guys. That's going to be the freshman I think we see early and often in Austin. And then Aaron Butler, he's another guy that now he flashed. It wasn't consistency. He was inconsistent, if anything, but we did see we saw some production out of him this spring that I think the room needed. I think there was a few guys that needed to step up. Livingstone did. I think Butler kind of pushed himself into that upper echelon a little bit, but give me Livingstone at X. I think that's exactly where he'll line up when he comes out on the field. And don't be surprised if Kalik Lockett makes a little bit of an impact because he's an X as well. He's an outside guy. And honestly, I think he's closer to the prototype because he's long and he's fast and he's got amazing hands. And so you get some more of that speed built back into the offense. It's not just Wingo. You get some more of that speed because ultimately that seemed to be the equalizer for the Horns the last couple of years.
Good one from Ezekiel Swanson. Wondering if this year's wide receiver core will be like last year's run game. Great against weak teams, stonewalled against a good secondary. Hope not, but worries me they didn't get the other portal targets. There's a guy we haven't mentioned yet, and golly, I'm surprised we haven't. And his name's Arch Manning, and your hope, I'm not saying it's reality yet, but your hope is that the ability to go from in the pocket or maybe outside the pocket from 1 to 2 to 3, which takes a while, which is hard for defensive back to cover for that long, might be better this year than it was last year. Does that sound reasonable? What do y'all think on that one?
There's definitely going to be more reading defenses. There will be more progressions. Ian, you want to tread lightly on this one?
I think so much of this depends. I think Arch is better than Quinn Ewers. That's not really a big debatable point to me. So much depends on Wingo and how much he's grown.
Yeah.
I think Moore is going to be dangerous no matter where he plays in the slot or outside. He's a dangerous, speedy guy. He played extremely well with Arch last year. I think Mosley is going to translate very well. When you see a guy play that well as a freshman in the ACC, like even if he were a G5 and he were playing like that, that usually translates pretty well because the gap on the perimeter is not quite the same as it is in the trenches when you go up levels.
And his quarterback play just went up times 5.
His quarterback play is way better. It really just depends on if Wingo is Wingo Isaiah Bond, where he's a lethal gadget player and he has injury issues, or is he going to be that but healthy and also skilled like Golden? And that's like almost the entire – I'd say that's the biggest question of the season.
And Justin, you've been pounding that drum too. It's like Wingo's a great athlete, but he still has some work to do to become a receiver like every freshman does.
Right. That's the biggest thing with Ryan is last year there were no expectations. You don't really tackle that onto a true freshman, especially in a room that he walked into that was already loaded. Now, expectations. And that's a big thing in Texas. Can he hold on to those and maximize that? He's got to get free releases, guys. He has got to get off the line of scrimmage. And if you watch the tape last year, he was held like he was in Harris County Jail. Like they held this kid weekly, and he didn't get the calls a lot of time. The Clemson game and Ohio State games were probably the two worst that I saw. He's got to fight through that. He's got to have violent hands. If he can get a release, he's going to get behind it. There's no DBs in the country he can't get behind. And that's going to force the safety to pay attention, and that is going to open up this whole offense, unlike what we've seen in the last couple of years with Quinn. Ryan's got to get more refined. But the beauty about Ryan Wingo is he's working on that every day. He is very aware of what he's really good at and what he needs to work on. This kid is constantly focusing on catching the ball in the cone. He is constantly working. Him and Arch, when they haven't done spring stuff for football, they've been working out together and doing things. And so at the end of the day, Ryan's got, he's got to develop. And he will. He's getting bigger. He's getting faster. He's getting stronger. He's just 19 years old. We're starting to see the maturation of him, and he's already been incredibly mature since the first day he stepped on campus. If he can get out of that jam, if he can get some violent hands at the line of scrimmage and get a good release, get a clear release, man, that's going to be the biggest difference for Ryan. And he's going to have to fight these DBs. These DBs are going to battle him at the line. They're going to try to hold on to him as much as possible. If he can break that, that's when he takes off. That's your 1,000-yard. I think DeAndre Moore is going to wind up being your 1,000-yard receiver in this group. But I think Wingo is going to be your big play guy, because if he can get behind the DB, that's what him and Arch do. That's going to neutralize everything else that a defense tries to throw at Texas. It's because like Ian said, trademark, Arch throws bombs. Ryan catches bombs. Profit.
I like this. I do like this question. Here's my stance on 1,000-yard stuff these days. I think we're going to see a lot more, just because as long as Texas keeps playing more games, it's more opportunities. Like, I think it's great that Trey Wisner reached the 1,000-yard threshold, and I know that the program's going to sell it, but let's recognize how many games it took. I know the NFL does it for 17 games. So I think you can still look at 1,000-yard seasons, build them for what they are, but just understand that they're getting extra opportunities at it. But the record books are what the record books are. So I think so. I mean,
Golden goes for $1,000 if he doesn't get dinged up in the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
I think we had this story written for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Is Steve Smith a good comp?
No, they're both tough. They're both very tough and scrappy. Steve Smith can fly. Okay, Steve Smith was fast. I don't think DeAndre has quite that speed. I think the sizes are similar. I think their dispositions are similar, even though Steve is kind of a tough dude, but so is DeAndre. But Steve Smith could scoot, guys. He could run.
Charlie checking in. Ian, you kind of touched on this. Do you think we'll see more 10 or empty? Not those aren't the same thing. And I think it's a good question to kind of spur some discussion. We'll see a lot of empty, but probably not much 10, like you mentioned, right, Ian?
Well, there's no point. Jack Injuries is a terrific flex tight end. So if you substitute out your tight end for another receiver, and it's like, now we have all these receivers. Well, every time you substitute, the defense has a chance to substitute too. And if you substitute out your tight end, they can say, okay, well, let's substitute in another defensive back. Let's get into a dime package or some kind of specialty nonsense that's going to be calibrated to punish Texas for losing. Like, you lose your tight end, you throw out like 75, 85% of your run game. You just cancel it out. The defense can not worry about it anymore. That's why Tom Herman was always playing in 11 personnel. It's like, I would rather flex my tight end out or go empty and throw the ball on a package that is designed to stop the run than sub my tight end out and expand my passing game a little bit, but allow the defense to expand their pass defense a lot. Like, if you're facing the Texas defense, you're doing everything you can to avoid throwing the ball against the third down package. Because when Texas starts adding defensive backs and pass rushers, you are in a world of hurt trying to throw the ball. You want to maintain a running threat so that they can't get into that package. And so you will not see Texas. I doubt you see Texas get into 4 receiver sets unless, God forbid, Jack Injuries gets hurt or something like that.
And I didn't say DeAndre Moore is slow. I never said that. Steve Smith is fast. Okay, just understand. Steve Smith is another level of speed.
Teams don't go into 10 personnel because of the receivers they have. They go into 10 personnel because of the offense they run. It's not a skill thing, it's a scheme thing. Mike Leach would put 4 wide receivers on the field, and if he really felt frisky, would put a 5th wide receiver on the field because their offense is designed to flood all these defensive backs with wide receivers and to make him pick the wrong one. It's not because he had superstars. I mean, he had some good ones, don't get me wrong. But that's because their offense, their preferred method or primary method or first method of like getting short yardage or getting 5 to 6 yards was the quick pass. Whereas Sark preferred method is, all right, let's run outside zone and see if we can get 6 or 7 and then break it off. You need a tight end to do that. And that means that you're going to use, you're going to use those guys in your offense. So it's offensive. It's predicated more on offense than it is on personnel. Because I don't even think Sark ran much 10 personnel when he did have all those weapons at Alabama, just because, well, you got to have somebody to block for Najee Harris, and he believes in that as well. So I don't think you'll see much 10. Last one, and some of these big body wide receivers should be able to help red zone issues. Yes and no. I mean, you're hoping that you may not need the wide receivers a whole lot in the red zone, but I mean, I guess it doesn't
with this
hurt,
new
right?
quarterback. I think with him being more than one dimensional, I think that's also going to help out in the red zone.
I guess you may see guys one-on-one more just because safeties know that they got to come downhill maybe a little bit more often.
Ian's pondering.
Yeah, I'm not a big believer. I mean, goal line fades stink. 15.
Have you heard of that new area they call? It's like right outside the red zone. I heard Gruden calling it. It's not new, but it's the first time I heard it. Like scary red, or there was a word,
something like that. Yeah, like the 23.
There was a term. And if you can score in that, the red zone numbers don't even matter. If you're kind of in that range and you still score, I don't know. It seemed fascinating. I always learn something watching those guys.
Do you know what else? You know what else solves that? Arch throwing bombs, scoring from 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 out. Not have to deal with it.
Another year of Jarrett Gibson, to me, is a huge help in the red zone. Huge. CJ Baxter healthy. There aren't red zone problems if he's healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the old line? If you score, and it's easier to have a 1-play drive than a 9-play drive or something like that. That's what coaches like to say. Definitely Steve Sarkisian as well. Before we keep on going, got to show some love to our other sponsor, and that is Andre the Lawyer.
This video is brought to you by Andre the Lawyer. If you're injured, trust the team that secured millions for their clients and helped thousands of Texans with their injury case. Car wrecks, slip and falls, 18-wheeler accidents, on-the-job injuries, and wrongful deaths. Don't let insurance tell you what your claim is worth. Hire Andre the Lawyer to fight for you. Principal office is in Dallas, but they serve Texans throughout the state. So don't wait and call Andre the Lawyer today at 214-444-8808. That's 214-444-8808. The contact information is in the description.
Got one more topic, but I do like this question a lot from Ryan Nelson. Are you higher on A&M or OU in 25? Post-spring, a little bit higher on OU. I don't think A&M has a quarterback to fear, and OU's defense will be nasty this year, and the offense can't be worse.
The tier is the big key there.
It can always get worse.
It can always get worse. We covered Texas football in the 2010s. It can always get worse.
Yes.
Especially when you have a defensive coach taking over play
Is
calling.
OU's defense going to be that great?
That should be good.
They should be pretty good.
Yeah, they got.
David Stone wound up staying. I know that helps.
Well, and the guy who's better than him stayed too.
Yeah. Yeah, they're.
I think Mateer makes a big difference there.
I don't know.
Now,
Who's he
how
throwing?
big? I don't know, but
Who's he throwing to? That's the thing.
maybe to one of those D3 tight ends.
And
Yeah.
if he's not throwing to him, how much is he running? And how long can he hold that up?
I guarantee
And so-
you, Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons, and Leona Lafau would love for Mateer to run.
OU is going to be. It's hard for me to see like 5-7 OU.
They'll be competitive. They're going to be. They're going to be competitive.
Is 7
Invisible
wins,
probably last year.
is 7 wins good enough for that program now? And
To keep does 7 wins keep does he keep his job?
That's the tens of millions of dollar question.
Depends on what Nagy thinks, it seems like.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good point.
One of the problems they have is that their schedule is such that the difference between like 6 wins and 8 wins is much greater than it would normally be. Like to actually win 8 games is a much higher bar. They have to be a really good team to win 8 or 9 games because they play Auburn, Michigan, Alabama, Missouri, Tennessee again, South Carolina, right?
Yeah, I don't know about South Carolina's going to be really good. I don't know. I'm wondering about
in Texas,
LSU, and Texas. It's like almost the who's who of the SEC this year, minus Georgia and
Bill, our good buddy Billy Lucci would very much tell you that the SEC's doing that on purpose. They're giving the schedule to make it worse for OU, but make it super easy for Texas.
I do want to kind of one thing about A&M though. Don't have a quarterback to fear. I don't think he's. I see what you're talking about, but I also think he's a really good fit in that offense.
With another year and getting his running back. Look, Le'Veon Moss is a dog, okay? He is a difference maker. That ball game in College Station would have looked a little bit differently, not much, but a little bit different if Moss was toting the rock last November. I think that makes a big difference. They like Reed. That locker room likes Reed. They're going to win some games from him just because of that. They've got a good chemistry there, a good mojo with him. He's not dominant at all, but he's not going to make mistakes like Kellen Mond did. He's gonna do exactly what he's equipped to do. I don't think he tries to do too much, but I would say the same thing that we asked about Oklahoma. Who's he going to throw it to? Like, to me, that's the biggest game. I think the offensive line is going to come back better. The running game is going to be better. I don't know who he's throwing it to.
They added a couple guys that are pretty good.
Concepcion can play. The transfer from NC State, I get that. There's got to be 3 or 4 more guys, especially in a long, and what we've learned, a long SEC schedule. You need dudes and depth.
I think they'll be a lot better than Oklahoma.
Really?
If Elko has a hold on that locker room, because
I think he does.
Their defense was garbage last year. Guys didn't know what to do.
With NFL guys.
It looked like one of those deals where guys were not, like the guys were tuning out. They were not bought in, it looked like.
Shamar Stewart, I think, was just waiting for the draft.
A lot of their
2 years.
There's a couple guys up front that were like, it seems like you are capable of much more than this. But worse than that, their safeties did not know what to do behind them.
Weren't those kind of pickups from the portal that were third top options?
Yeah, they had some of that. They had some guys that just didn't seem to quite get it on their own deal. If they make the year 2 leap that coaches make when they're having any success, then I think A&M will be a lot better than Oklahoma because they could be realistically good to very good on both sides of the ball. Oklahoma is not going to be very good on offense this year. It's just not going to happen with FCS outside receivers and your quarterback trying to, like what Joe was talking about, trying to hero ball you through every game with no tight end.
Are they gonna start a true freshman at left tackle too?
Yeah. They're saying they're
a really good true freshman, but a true freshman.
He's a great true freshman.
That's one of
but he's a true freshman.
That's got to be a selling point for them because their other tackles are not it. They better start the true freshman because none of those other guys can move.
Well, if they don't, the next coach will be the one coaching him up and, shaking his hand when he walks across stage.
Yeah, or he'll be transferring to Ole Miss or something.
Here's the other thing. I think Arkansas is still going to be pretty good. Taylor Greenback.
What do you mean still?
Who are they going to throw it to?
That coach was supposed to get Pittman was supposed to get fired, and doesn't he end up going to a bowl game? And I think
they hit expectations last year. They saved his job because Pittman was supposed to be out the door 2 years ago, right? What, 2 years ago?
They went 7-6, had a 1,000-yard rusher, won their bowl game, and that was a coach who was supposed to be fired.
They also had the leading receiver
Petrino.
in the SEC. Didn't they have the leading receiver in the SEC? Andrew Armstrong.
Oh, he was a receiver. Yeah. He led the league.
I only know that kid because a buddy of mine coached him at A&M Commerce, and so really good kid. I think Arkansas takes another step back. They had some guys drafted and they didn't replace them.
Yeah, it seemed like they were on the wrong end of a lot of portal transactions.
Yes.
Their schedule is okay. They get Auburn at home. I think they get A&M at home. I think that's done being in Jerry World.
Is it really? I am ready to watch A&M and Arkansas actually play on each other's campuses. I think that would make that game so much better.
And then they have to – I don't know what their non-conference looks like, but Auburn at home, A&M at home, I think, at Tennessee, at LSU, Mississippi State at home, at Ole Miss, at Texas, Missouri at home. So, I mean, it may just be another 6-6 year and then go beat Tech in the Liberty Bowl again.
Well, they did the thing a year before what Florida did with Napier. Hey, why spend money on buyout when we can go NIL? And they went pretty big in NIL last year. They had to keep Landon Jackson. They had to keep a handful of their top guys. And then they lose their best linebacker, Brad Spence. He's hanging out in, I think, Austin right now. And so I think Arkansas probably takes a step back. I like Green, but I only like him because Texas can absolutely dominate him. And so, I mean, he's a good prospect, but he's going to make 2 plays a game and he's going to make 5 mistakes a game.
I do wonder what happened. And I bet that locker room's kind of galvanized with the whole I'm a Leva thing. Like, whatever, see you later. But
that's another.
I wonder if it's time for. All right. One last thing to talk about. I think
Jackson Miles had a good point. Kelvin Banks was once a true freshman. We have all watched the recruitments of those guys. Kelvin Banks was ready to be a starter in college when he was in high school. Michael Fasusi will be a starter in college, and he will be good at some point, probably really good. They're not the same. Kelvin Banks came in. They're not the same. They're both great prospects. Kelvin Banks could have played college ball when he was a senior in high school.
Love to hear it. All right. One last topic to talk about. I think I presented this to y'all in our group text. Steve Sarkisian entering his 5th year as a head coach of the Texas Longhorns. The last time a Texas coach coached his 5th season was in 2002 when Mack Brown was in charge. And I figured it out. Hopefully this works. Hopefully, there we go. Looks good. There have only been a handful of coaches who have made the most of their opportunity to last at least 5 years. Some of them, their 5th year was their final year. I think McWilliams and maybe McWilliams was his last year.
Last season.
And then Ed Price, the next year in 1956, he went 1-9. And I don't think Texas is going to go 1-9. But Justin, what's it say that maybe not the names or the amount of names on this list, but that, it's been that long. There are a few different reasons why, but just why it's been so long that Texas hasn't had a coach go into his 5th season on the 40 acres.
Yeah, when you brought it up yesterday, I kind of thought it was a little fascinating, especially because there haven't been a lot of coaches coaching football in Texas in 100+ years. And then you start looking through it, and honestly, Sark is in that really good zone right now, that really good area. Not saying Darrell Royal-esque, but he's having that same kind of success at this stage in his career. But to me, the most noteworthy was that it took almost 25 years for a coach to get to his fifth year. That to me is the stink on the dead corpse. Like, how in the world did they go that long before a guy hit into his fifth year? And I think it just shows that Sark is the right guy. I think it shows they made the right call. I think it shows that programs, college sports, are cyclical, and there are decades that you go up and down. Texas obviously had their worst in the 2010s. But yeah, the fact that it took almost 23 years between coaches to get to your fifth year, it portends well for success for Sark. If he's made it to this point, he's probably going to continue to have success. You send 23 guys to the NFL draft. That's the most in college athletics in the last 2 years. That's not slowing down. 26 is going to be a really good draft for Texas. 27 could be an amazing draft for Texas. I think Sark's going to feed off that success as well. I think Texas it just shows you can get lost. You can get lost in a lot of this, but Texas has found what they needed to find. They found a consistent guy. And let's see if fifth-year guy can do what Fred, Darrell, and Mac did, and that's damn near win conference, damn near play for a national title, and damn near be relevant.
Hopefully a little even better than that.
A little better. That's what I'm hoping too. These are long schedules, guys. They're playing 15, 16 games now. There's a reason the Miami Dolphins are the only team in the history of the NFL to ever go undefeated. There's a reason, man. The longer the season, the less likely it's going to happen. But in this day and age, get in the playoff and just let her eat. Get to the playoff and give yourself a chance.
I'm trying to, some of these I was alive for, 2 of them to be exact. But I'm trying to just see if there's any common thread that goes through all of them. Fred Akers, that team was almost national champion. I think they
were in 1977. They should have won the national championship. They lost to Notre Dame in the Cotton Bowl. They would have won the national title in Earl's senior season.
Right.
And 83. If Craig Curry doesn't drop the punt in the Cotton Bowl against Georgia, they win the national championship in 1983. That's 2 titles right there. Fred Akers would have had 2 rings right there if not for 2 fluke plays.
He would have had 3. Well, 77 Cotton Bowl wasn't a fluke, or I guess 78 Cotton Bowl. That 1981 team, the only reason they aren't national champion is because Clemson went undefeated with Danny Ford or something like that. That was Clemson's only success until Dabo arrived and finally got it going. So, that's a fifth year where things were operating well. McWilliams, as you can tell, did not work out very well after Shock the Nation.
They tried to stay home. They tried to keep an alum there. And what we learned was that's not always the best move to make. Because Akers was part of Royal staff. So Correct. A lot of times it was just continuity there. And then at some point, after John Mackovic, they decided we're going to have to look outside of the parameters of burnt orange goggles. And once they did that, I think that's when the program took off again.
I was trying to find a common thread, though, and there's a little bit of one with this year's Texas team and the 2002 team. And I actually wrote about it in the 96 was a Big 12 championship. Thank you, Chris Bennett. That's roll left, of course.
Yeah, that was James Brown down 2 touchdown underdog.
But in 2002, throughout the pre-draft process, I think either Sark or Quinn Ewers himself spoke with Chris Sims. And, for as much as people may want to, I don't want to say dog, but just not fondly remember Chris Sims, he still really seems to love Texas. Was all hyping up those draft guys when he and Florio were interviewing them. Seems to root for the program. I know he doesn't make it out much, but he's got covering the NFL is tough. And so he's got to do that. But that 2002 season, the quarterback controversy had ended, Applewhite had graduated. Chance Mock was there, and I think that would have been his redshirt freshman year.
Yeah.
Vince Young was redshirting. He wasn't going to play. And so finally there was after 3 seasons of the quarterback controversy that still lives in infamy on Texas internets, like it was finally Sims' turn. And yeah, they lost a close one they got 12-0'd by Oklahoma. No, it was a closer game. It was 35-24.
Texas was beating Oklahoma in the fourth quarter in 2002. Yeah. Then all of a sudden they couldn't cover Trent Smith any longer.
And then, as Chris Bennett mentioned, the Tech game there, but like I feel like there's a through line here between, Mack Brown's 5th season and maybe Sark's, like quarterback and the not to say that it was tumultuous over the past couple of years. Injuries stink, but it doesn't cause like tumult. There would never seem to be any like real controversy, but it had finally left in 2002. Everything went pretty great for that team. Couldn't beat OU, lost to Tech, 50-20 over A&M, 27-24 at Nebraska, dogged Baylor, beat Oklahoma State, beat Kansas State in Manhattan. Like, there's some good teams. That is a good team, and that quarterback calmness finally helped them probably get to a level that they aspired to for quite some time, to beat Nick Saban in the Cotton Bowl. Anything else?
I was at that Cotton Bowl. It was cold that morning. It was very cold. The hottest thing was Lee Jackson. When he had that little scoop and score against Marcus Randall, the tides turned. And then Roy Williams did his Superman impersonation. I see a trend here. I see you're looking for little trends. Mac Williams, Makovic, Mac Brown. We were on a Mac kick for whatever reason. But yeah, that 2002 team for Mac, man. Yeah, that OU game was the worst, because that was the year. That's the year Roderick Babers had a pick 6 right before the end of the first half. I think the quarterback was Nate Hibble, and I mean, just throwing soft darts, dude. Like, just
isn't that the game where they Nate Hibble came in beat up, and Texas was like, let's knock Hibble out of the game. And then they like beat him up, and then Oklahoma pulled him, and then Jason White came in and started running circles around Texas, and it was like, we made a huge mistake.
It may have been because, White did that in 03 and 04.
I think 03 and 04, White was no longer mobile because of injuries.
Right. His knee was
gone. Never mobile. He had like 19 knee surgeries.
He was at first, and then
right. I mean, but it was a very robotic mobile.
That 02 team, there are some differences though. Cedric Benson is probably not on this Texas roster. And whether it be Cedric Baxter or any other back. And then the wide receiver core probably isn't what it is not difficult for me to say that Roy Williams and BJ Johnson and Sloan Thomas might have a leg up or be pretty similar to what this year's receiver core looks like.
They were better.
This group could be better, I think.
They could. I'm not saying they're not going to be. I'm saying right now, buddy, trust me, that other 3 group was better. They were already productive at that stage too.
They were young, though.
If you can erase the Oregon, if you can erase that Holiday Bowl against Oregon when they were freshmen, those guys did their job, man.
Wasn't that year 2 for them, 2002? Were they all sophomores?
Yes. Because Sloan Thomas held Dusty Mangum's kick, and that was the last play of his career.
Or were they juniors, Dusty Mangum's?
Sloan Thomas wore 12 before Colt did.
They would have been juniors, I think. I think 2003 was the last year. And then 2004, it was like Vince throwing to Tony Jeffrey.
I thought Tony Jeffrey wore 12.
That's right. Right. Sloan Thomas wore 1.
Yeah, Sloan wore. Well, Sloan started off as Sloan had a different number as a freshman. I think he had 9 maybe, and then 1. I think he changed it to 1 his sophomore or junior year.
we have reached the naming dudes part of the
Yeah.
podcast, which is always fun. But hey,
there's your sign.
Wingo needs to be Roy. That's the moral of the story.
Yeah.
Hey, TW 26 215 1963 3.14 has it. There is not a Roy Williams on this roster. I love Ryan Wingo. Everyone knows that. I will profess that daily. There's not a Roy Williams on this roster.
But there may be enough other stuff. There is an Arch Manning, and we'll get to cover that. We'll cover that throughout the rest of May, throughout the rest of the summer. Going to have it all here on the Inside Texas YouTube channel. So make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Of course, head to InsideTexas.com. We will have all of May, coaches on the road, when players get back for summer workouts, heck, even some, business stuff whenever SEC spring meetings comes around. We're going to have it all fully covered. So, Ian, thank you. Justin, thank you. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on IT Live, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors.